Everybody, especially for the last session block. You guys are the bravest people. This is a look at the ongoing efforts to revitalize Drupal's front end, which is a mouthful and somewhat pretentious, but other attempts at this title sounded very negative. So that's why I ended up with that. Yeah, and the slides are available along with some resources. So if you're into that, enjoy. Yeah, first section, kind of the pre-section, we'll do some housekeeping. So this is me. I'm Brian Perry. I live in the Chicago suburbs, but I grew up in Cranston, Rhode Island. So it's always really awesome to get back to Ned Camp, and I am staying with my parents, as I often do when I come here, so it's a real blast from the past. I work for Chapter 3 as a front-end developer. I'm really interested in modern Drupal front-end and how Drupal can work with the front-end JavaScript ecosystem. I love Nintendo and video games. I'm currently playing Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom on my Switch, which I really like, and I started playing Yakuza 0 on my Steam Deck, which I'm enjoying even more than I thought I was going to. It's a lot of fun. I have a website, brianperry.dev. I finally quit Twitter because it's the worst, and I'm on Blue Sky, which has been really fun so far. So I encourage all Drupal people to get on there, and my handle is my domain name, which is really cool. I just did that this morning. Yeah, nice. I think that's enough about me. I work for Chapter 3. I thank them for sending me out here to stay with my parents. And I work on decouple projects at Chapter 3. Looking forward to getting a little bit more involved in the maintenance of Next Drupal. But again, thanks, Chapter 3. Another important disclaimer. There are things that I'm going to talk about today that I have been directly involved in or maintain, but a number of things that I don't, and am just some dude who is enjoying following along with this stuff at home. So just take that grain of salt with everything that we talk about today. So let's dive in and let's take a broad look at what's going on in front-end Drupal. Part 1, everything is terrible and we're all slowly dying. Yes. I'm going to spiral for a little bit here, as I do. Nobody likes Twig anymore. Nobody likes Layout Builder, except for Rod, who did a session on it. I think that means he likes it. We're missing out on all the innovation in the JavaScript ecosystem. The robots are coming for our jobs. WordPress is burning itself to the ground. That photo has it's such interesting new context. It was the original printing press or something? Gutenberg. There you go. Don't get me started on the whole election. We don't have time for that. The Patriots are 3-7. Although I was at the Bears-Patriots game and watched the Patriots absolutely annihilate the Bears, so it kind of goes against my spiraling, but whatever. And those last couple, probably not directly related to Drupal anyway. And I don't know if anybody has anything they'd like to publicly panic about, but we can take a second if Drupal or otherwise.
Flooding!
Flooding, yeah! That's the worst. Anything else? Well, you guys are healthy. I appreciate that. Okay, so took a second to spiral, but part 2, actually, Drupal front end got kind of good while we were panicking. Didn't solve all of its problems, but there is a brighter side to look at. So a simple thing like this, you can disable caches and enable debugging in the UI now. This has been in there for a little while, but literally every time I just flip here and turn this on and off, it makes me happy. You'd have to, dig through YAML files and stuff and settings files to do this in the past, and this is awesome. Single directory components, improve developer experience. Again, This does not solve all of my, hopes and dreams with what can be done in front-end Drupal, but it's very nice. I've actually the project that I'm working on right now, primarily chapter 3, is a traditional Drupal theme. I probably haven't built an actual Drupal theme in maybe like 3 years before this. And it's been a good opportunity to use single directory components. And I really like the process so far. It's great. And like this example, just a super simple example, but I have a component that uses a custom element, and I have my schema, YAML, and CSS, and Twig, and JavaScript. I need it all in one place. It's great. Definitely, a lot better than the kind of roll your own versions of components we had before. And then the other thing that I think sometimes comes up with single directory components, but I always like to reinforce, is that this adds the concept of a component as kind of a core primitive in Drupal. So this is the actual plugin that introduces components for single directory components. So this just means that it's a core part of Drupal. People can build and extend on top of it. The UI patterns, the version 2 of the UI patterns module, and that suite, they're doing a lot of work in building on top of single directory components. Experience Builder is, and again, I'll just recap the whole beginning of the talk. No, I'm here for the people in this room anyway. Sorry, recording people. Right. Recipes also is a great thing. It's not exclusively a front end thing, but recipes are wonderful. For contrib projects, I pretty much always create some kind of recipe so I can easily spin up and destroy and have a reliable starting point. But I also think it'll do some great things for front end, be it having, example content or being able to distribute and package single directory components. So recipes also just help make my front end Drupal life better these days. And then also outside of Drupal, but relevant to building Drupal themes and such, is that the core web platform is getting better and making our lives easier every day. A lot of the things that we used to turn to Sass for, you can just do in CSS, things like variables and nesting and many, many other things. And Aubrey had her talk on all the crazy developments in colors in CSS. And yeah, a lot of exciting developments there. A lot of the things that we turned to jQuery before is just now part of the core JavaScript. And, we're ripping out jQuery from Drupal core or have, I can't remember. So a lot of the great things in JavaScript are just coming into the core platform, including things like ES modules. So being able to import JavaScript from other JavaScript files. And import maps are part of that. And then there's also custom elements and web components, which is a kind of core web way to be able to define components. And cool things like view transitions, which makes it really easy to do multi-page transitions and slick animations and things like that. And there are so many other things. But it's getting better and simpler every day. So yeah, part 3, page builders, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems. Works out really well with the keynote that we had earlier. Makes my job so easy. And yeah, we can go back to spiraling, which clearly means that the video will shut off again. But yeah, the exercise here, and I'll help lead us through one, is you can just pick a competing page builder and spend some time freaking out about how it stands up to Drupal. This example is Wix, which is something that is specifically referenced in some of the requirements for Drupal CMS and Experience Builder. But this is what a Wix demo looks like. They're definitely shoving a lot of AI nonsense into this demo, but still the user experience is pretty slick and fluid. And at the very least, Layout Builder has already caught some stray bullets so far, but at the very least, it's fallen behind in some ways, the overall experience compared to some of the other solutions out there. And also another challenge, I've built things that I've been really happy with Layout Builder, but it does, to have the best of Layout Builder, it really does require stitching together a lot of different contrib solutions that, it requires Drupal experience to kind of know how you can make Layout Builder as good as it can be. And one side effect of this is that in the general contrib ecosystem, there has been a ton of other competing page builders that have been created. I won't go through all of them, but here's just a couple of little videos with some examples. This is the Mercury editor, which I believe that there have been sessions on this here at past NEDCamps. It's built on top of layout paragraphs. But this provides, a nice user experience, adding different components in, all that good stuff here, the slick zooms in the video. There also is 1x Internet has the front-end editing module, which, has some similar concepts, but there's the, side editing tray. It also does a lot of cool things around live preview, which is something that I've had a lot of interest in Drupal in the past. And another thing that I like about it is that while it works well with paragraphs, it can work with any entity in Drupal. And there's a lot of interesting ways that you can extend it or use portions of it in other contexts, which we'll talk about in some of the decoupled stuff we're going to talk about in a bit. And then there's also Experience Builder, which, there's a lot of excitement and a lot of effort around, which again is another, page building experience, hopefully with a bit of a more modern feel. And I can't think of anything better than just doing a quick live demo of Experience Builder, because you need something to panic about. Yeah, this is a few days. I heard you say that earlier, and this is the code base is a few days old, so I think it still works. But yeah, either way. But yeah, I'm behind enough that it doesn't even matter that it broke and got fixed. But yeah, so if you haven't seen this, maybe you've seen demos from DrupalCon or anything like that. I think that just the cool thing to actually see, and I installed it and tried around. Like it is a real thing. There's a lot of work left to be done, but a lot of the front end itself is functional in some pretty exciting ways. So there is a list of components on the left hand side here. I can take a hero and drop it in. I can have a heading. Dump my heading in. You can drag and drop and reorder the sections. I can select a section here and update the content. And, it updates live. Yeah, I mean, so, the user interface, a lot of the kind of live updating is really nice. The UI itself seems to be reminiscent of Figma, which I think a lot of people might be familiar with. So a lot of, exciting promise here, but still a lot of work to be done. For example, I don't believe it's possible to actually save what you create in Experience Builder today. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They'll get there, but. Yeah, so definitely very exciting, and I'm, following along with the development there, but also at the same time, again, kind of with the great lead-in from the keynote, is that page builders are in a lot of ways also a bit of a double-edged sword. There's a lot of the things that were discussed in the keynote, but also just from the front-end development perspective, you are giving so much flexibility potentially in the way that things can be built. So you're either having to, live with that and deal with the fallout from that, or find ways to restrict your system to prevent those things. So I'm excited that we're trying to modernize and have a modern page building experience. But there are also, I want to make sure that we also don't lose the traditional theming elements of Drupal along the way. So part 4, improving Drupal's front end by not using Drupal's front end. So a little bit on some of the things that are going on in the decoupled ecosystem. And, we talked about some ways that front end has gotten nicer in Drupal. Some of the things that we're trying to do with page building and experience builder and Drupal CMS. But I don't think that decoupled use cases are going to go away. Even though, for example, Drupal CMS doesn't really seem to be. The video is going to have checkpoints where I just say we're back. But yeah, I don't think decoupled use cases are going away. Outside of Drupal, even in the thinking about the general JavaScript ecosystem, this is not an uncommon way to build sites, getting data from some sort of headless API. And people are going to continue doing this with Drupal, and there are a lot of things that Drupal do in this area that are very good. So yeah, I don't think this is going to go away, even given some of the things that are going on in the Drupal project in general. Next for Drupal has substantial adoption. The weekly NPM downloads are in the thousands. And anecdotally, I do hear from a lot of people, especially since I started working at Chapter 3, that have been using this, building sites on Next Drupal and having success. And also, I'm excited to get a little bit more involved in the maintainership of Next Drupal. There also have been things in the decoupled contrib ecosystem recently that I think are pretty exciting. So things like in GraphQL, the GraphQL Compose module. I won't go into the whole history of Drupal and GraphQL, but this makes it a lot easier to essentially assemble a GraphQL schema in Drupal, when a lot of that had to be custom code in the past. There is also from Octahedroid, there's the decoupled preview iframe module, and that just provides a really generic and kind of reusable way to be able to just preview content from another front end inside of Drupal. There's the front end editing module that we touched on, and I'll show some examples with that. And then also just kicked out a separate slide for this to give it a good plug. So for the Pittsburgh project for past DrupalCon, the Drupal API client was a project that I submitted and got funded at Pittsburgh. And we've already shipped an initial version of our JSON API client. But the short story is that this should hopefully make it easier to source data from Drupal, something that you can either use or extend, and hopefully allows you to get going a little bit more quickly and focus on the things that are either specific to your framework or that make your decoupled build unique. And also, there just seem to be interesting and exciting new projects popping up frequently. These are just a few that I've come across recently. So there's the NodeHive project. This Blockly page editor, I believe, is a Vue and Nuxt project, but it has a really interesting visual editor that's part of it. And then Octahedroid has a couple of starter kits, one for GraphQL and one for JSON API. So yeah, a lot of interesting movement in the contrib space there. I'm also working on a project that to just kind of play with some of these tools. I'm calling it Sanctuary, but it's an Astro starter kit, and it assembles some of these interesting tools that we were talking about. So it's a few different Astro starter kits, planning on supporting both JSON API and GraphQL. It uses Astro's Dev Toolbar app, which is pretty cool, and also does some things in being able to infer the schema from your content model in Drupal so that you can have type safety and schema validation in your front end. And then also there are related Drupal recipes. This actually is another thing about recipes that is being used well by the front end community, being able to have like a full recipe that can give you a great starting point that's compatible with the decoupled front end. But yeah, so it also has the integrated preview and some of the things I'm experimenting with front end editing. So right now it's still pre-release. I'm hoping as things wind down this year, I'll be able to actually publish versions that people can use and experiment with, but I'll give a quick demo of some of the things that are possible in this and pray that the video doesn't shut off again. All right, so yeah, this is a Drupal site installed from a recipe that has some example default content. So for this page here, I can edit, and if I make a little change here, it has draft preview. So if I click on the preview here, I'll see my current in progress edit and the change rendered in my Astro starter kit. I'm great at typing, but it didn't, doesn't have a revision here. It doesn't require the node to be saved to be able to see what's going on. And I can go back to editing there. And if I just view the content, I see the published state of that. And then I mentioned Astro's developer toolbar. So I built a plugin here. And if I enable it, it highlights basically all of the things that are being sourced from Drupal and allows them to be edited. So for example, I can select the main body of the page here, and it uses the front-end editing sidebar to allow me to edit that in place, or I can do the same with menu items. But yeah, I'll just make a similar change here. And then if I go ahead and save it, it reloads the iframe with my new content. And there's a lot more that front-end editing module can do that I'm hoping can be implemented here, like the live preview especially. And then there's some interesting things with being able to like insert paragraphs and entities kind of in line that would be really cool. And then also I touched a little bit on the types and schema validation. This is probably a little bit hard to see, and that terminal's not helping. Can do that. But yeah, so there are some utilities here to be able to essentially source the content schema from Drupal. So we have a schema for an article in this case, and we also have types, TypeScript types that are inferred from that. And really just what that does, I mean, there's a handful of things, but one thing that does is it gives you really nice autocomplete. So if I do node dot, I get all of the properties on that object, and I can go into, field image here and see all of the different, if I want to get the URL, it's really easy to just kind of tab down to that object and get the data that I need. But also there's a lot of great validation things that you can do, and, it works well with TypeScript and all that great stuff. So yeah, excited about that, and it's just been a great opportunity to play with some of the cool new tools in the decoupled space. All right, we're doing pretty good here, aside from the video interruptions. Part 5, the wild ideas might not be so wild after all. So this is the part where everybody should put on their seatbelts, if you haven't done that already. There's the project of the JSX theme engine. So this is starting to get at some of the things we'll be looking at here are ways that people are experimenting with kind of going beyond Twig in Drupal. So the JSX theme engine, I believe, came out of Acquia's innovation lab. Came across this a while ago at this point, but it was one of those things where I saw it, I was like, this can't possibly be a real thing. And the idea here is that you, instead of using Twig, can build a theme using React and JSX in Drupal. It is still in Drupal, even though it ends up, using React. And I'm oversimplifying a lot of this for time. There'll be some resources in a second if you want to learn more. But kind of the big thing that it does is it's providing a translation layer between render arrays and front-end components. So it takes props, and that's another thing that I mentioned, forgot to mention with single directory components. it's also nice that they have the model of props and slots in single directory components, because that maps really well with component models from all of the other JavaScript frameworks. But anyway, anything that's passed to the components as props ends up getting serialized in your markup. And then slots are essentially just either JSX fragments that get injected into the app or an HTML element. But basically, yeah, it translates what Drupal has, gets enough of it in the server-side rendered initial version of the page so that it can be hydrated in Drupal. And again, it was crazy. I started digging into the code a little bit, and I'm like, no, I actually just need to see this in reality. And I swear it does work. It's kind of hard to show in a slide like this, because at the end of the day, it looks like the Umami demo. But they have some cool debugging tools that let you, essentially like console log the state of any component, and also tells you like what's being provided by Twig, what's React, etc. Yeah, and this also kind of got me looking elsewhere in the kind of PHP-friendly front-end communities, and I found that there were also some similar concepts out there. Laravel has a lot of interesting front-end tools to work with JavaScript. One of them is called Inertia, and Inertia is basically, it's doing something pretty similar in that this just provides a set of tools to be able to, essentially create a controller or a route in Laravel that it hands over to a front-end framework. And it's kind of doing similar things here in that what it does is it just has a particular system for passing along a component type and also a serialized set of attributes that then can be used to mount the component. And then at that point, it's kind of off to the races with React or whatever front-end framework you have. And it also provides some cool ways to be able to, at that point, incrementally update pages. So Inertia will respond on a next request with just the JSON that it needs to be able to provide the next page. So it can provide a pretty interesting experience. But anyway, I thought it was interesting that there are more examples of trying to find ways to be able to do what a PHP-based CMS or framework does well, but feed into these modern front-end frameworks. I also did experiment with a Drupal implementation of this. There's a Inertia module on Drupal.org. Kind of had to set it aside, but it's definitely gotten some people's attention recently, so maybe it'll be revived. But if you did want to experiment with it, there's a sandbox out there. And then Experience Builder itself kind of evolves the work that was done for that JSX theme engine. A lot of the same people who worked on that are working on Experience Builder full-time, as I understand it. And it's taking that idea that was, a full theme or a full page and evolving this into what they're calling a semi-coupled theme engine. So the idea here is that at any kind of level of your theme, it could either be rendered by Twig or rendered by a front-end framework. And when we looked at the Experience Builder demo before, that panel on the right-hand side, that actually is a form API form that is getting translated and injected into a running React app. And that's how we got the live preview, because that stuff ends up getting managed by Redux state in the React app. So that is, again, a really interesting application of this, and looks like it's going to end up being a pretty core part of Experience Builder. But I'm also really interested in what that could mean for Drupal, because that, potentially does mean that concept could exist in Drupal themes. I will, just say, obviously, Experience Builder is early. There's a lot of work and changes going on, and their focus is really just shipping Experience Builder. So really thinking of this as something that's going to come to Drupal is probably premature, but you can't stop me from getting excited about it. And yeah, that general idea of being able to kind of at any level of rendering, decide if it would be Twig or hydrated in, a front-end framework component, I think could be really powerful. So anyway, with that concept, there's way too much to get into than we can here. Ben Mullins, who's one of the core JavaScript maintainers and is leading a lot of the experience builder work from the front end side, he gave a great talk on this whole concept in Barcelona. There's also an issue in the experience builder queue that's putting together some documentation for the semi-decoupled theme engine. So if this is really interesting to you, it's a good read. And there also is the original JSX theme engine project. I would definitely think of that as kind of an artifact of past experiments, but it is out there and something you can try. And then also with Experience Builder, there are some even wilder experiments happening out in the issue queue. So this is one that has evolved a little bit, but they're experimenting with ways that it might be possible to essentially compile front-end components in Experience Builder. So in this little GIF, you see that they're changing Tailwind classes and editing a Preact component that then you can see a live preview of and can export into your Drupal project. So exploratory, but really interesting. And yeah, I love following along with this stuff and kind of thinking about what it could make possible in Drupal. And yeah, that previous example got me thinking, like, I don't know that I would necessarily want to build things this way in Experience Builder. And apparently they're thinking about some more developer-focused approaches to the same thing. But I thought about, like, what would I actually want here? And it's kind of similar to what we talked about with the semi-decoupled theme engine. And it's also another thing that's been popularized in the JavaScript ecosystem as the islands architecture. And if you haven't heard of that, this image sums it up pretty nicely. The general idea is that on a page, you'll have some things that can be completely server rendered and static, but other things that need to be dynamic or need to run client side. And each of those different things can be little different islands that live on their own. And Astro, which is a kind of a front-end meta framework, has this concept, and it even goes as far as allowing you to decide the strategy for when things are going to be imported and hydrated on the front end. And it also makes it possible to use different front-end frameworks for any of your islands. So even though you probably shouldn't, you could have a React header and a Svelte sidebar and a Vue image carousel. It's totally something you can do, and you'll regret it almost instantly. Again, I'm just trying to experiment and push some of these ideas and get discussion going in, like, what could happen in a post or partially post Twig future of Drupal. So I've been working on a Drupal implementation of this islands concept. Published it yesterday, the islands module. Still certainly very, very early. But I can show a quick demo of what this looks like and what's possible with this. So the module itself, there's the main islands module, but it also has an examples sub-module that you can install that just shows some examples. And this overview uses web components for a lot of the first examples. But so this first example component, it's a web component, but it only, when the component mounts, is when it gets styled and turned blue, for this example. And then the module offers a Drupal island custom element, and that what allows you to control the loading and use other JavaScript frameworks. But for the sake of these examples, the dotted outline indicates that Drupal island element. So this first one just loads this web component when it's visible, and it's already visible. But some of these examples get a little bit more complicated in that they require some interaction. So this one will only load the component when it's interacted with, and then the ones below you can have some fallback content in a template element like we see here. So this first one, when you interact with it, it'll mount but leave the pre-JavaScript server-rendered markup in place. And this next one just completely replaces it with the component. So that in and of itself, I think, has some interesting possibilities with Drupal, in that Drupal can server render the things in Twig that it already does really well. And then there's a lot of ways that we can then hydrate it in a front-end component and do some cool interactive things. And then you can also do stuff like use other front-end frameworks. So this is an example with Preact, which is a lighter weight but React-compatible framework. So here we're actually importing a separate JavaScript file, and then when the component loads, it's fully interactive with its own state, and we can see what the Preact component looks like there. That is using import maps, which is a more recent JavaScript feature, which makes it easier to be able to reference these your JavaScript files that could live anywhere in your themes or modules, or et cetera. And also there's a lot that import maps can do, like if you have a library like React that a lot of components are using, but you don't want to load 50 times. You'd have something like that in an import map. So right now that's a custom implementation of import maps, but there is a core issue where they're going to be adding import map support to core. I think Experience Builder also needs it as well. But yeah, going to keep messing around with this as well, build out some more examples, but it's another thing that if you want, you can try out the module, experiment with it. I'd love to see what ideas it sparks in everybody's brains. All right. Oh yeah, this also is very important. Yesterday, when I was publishing the module, I went on ChatGPT and I asked it to make a logo for the islands module, and I told it had to have the Drupal icon, and the Drupal icon had to be wearing sunglasses and on an island. And that's a pretty incredible result, I gotta say. We can say what we want about AI and ChatGPT and all that stuff, but if it gave us this, it can't be that bad. Yeah.
It shouldn't be the first image. It's got to be logo.image.
Yes. And then another interesting concept with some of the Drupal CMS stuff that's going on, the wild world of WebAssembly. So if you have seen the Drupal CMS trial experience, you can install Drupal in your browser, and it literally is a Drupal install that runs in your browser. Matt Glamon's done a lot of the work on that, and it's using WebAssembly. And WebAssembly is essentially like a specific portable compile target for the web, and there's a lot of ways to be able to translate other languages into WebAssembly. So this is interesting, just being able to run Drupal in your browser in general, but I also wonder about the possibilities in the future of being able to run Drupal on the edge or on a CDN. That opens up some really interesting decoupled and hosting use cases. But for a lot of the JavaScript things that we've looked at, we run into potentially some issues with server-side rendering. Maybe run into some cases where there's still more things that have to happen on the client side than we want. And we have the problem that Drupal can server-side render things really great, but it can server-side render PHP really great. So, how can we have more of that pre-rendering and server-side rendering for some of these more modern JavaScript things? I don't know is the short answer, but I wonder if some applications of WebAssembly can also help you. So yeah, just about up on time. But what does it all mean? And still a reminder of the disclaimer. Just one person who, in many cases, doesn't know what he's talking about. But it seems that Drupal is going all in on Experience Builder and putting a whole lot of effort behind that. And I think that there is a lot of work that is happening as a result of that, or in support of it, that does present our opportunity to expand Drupal's front end beyond Twig. And I've believed for a while that it's something that we need to find a way to do. So I'm very excited about that. And also, a lot of the things that could make Drupal more friendly with these front-end frameworks, for example, would really benefit decoupled use cases for Drupal as well. And a lot of the early concepts for Experience Builder, I think this is still true, but there was a lot of discussion about being able to use JSON storage in the database to represent some of that data. Layout Builder uses like serialized PHP arrays, which makes it harder to make that available, translate it, use it outside of Drupal. And if both Drupal and your front-end frameworks were talking in JSON, that should make various people's lives easier. So I'm excited about the possibilities there. But yeah, in general, the feeling that I have, and I would also encourage everybody to start thinking that now's the time to challenge what you thought was possible in Drupal's front end, and try crazy stuff, put it out there and share it, and maybe even pray and cross your fingers and see where this all ends up. And that's it. Any questions? We have some time here. I know that this is keeping people away from snacks and beverages. So either here or we can continue the conversation later as well. But yeah, any questions, comments, panic?
Well, yeah, since you dived into Experience Builder, do you feel like it's going to create a steep learning curve for people used to the Twig way of Drupal and the previous rendering?
Yeah, the question was if I think Experience Builder will create a steep learning curve for people who are used to the older Twig way of doing things. It's early, so it's hard to say, but I actually think currently the direction that they're going, it actually won't. And it actually really still is pretty Twig-based. It's Experience Builder itself that is taking advantage of the JavaScript frameworks, and maybe some of those more ambitious experiments will come to pass. But right now, it's really just a page builder for Twig and single directory components. So,
well, then there's the second part of that question. Will it create a steep learning for people wanting to contribute to Experience Builder as a project?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good question. Will it create a steep learning curve for people who want to contribute to Experience Builder? And yes, I think the short answer is yes. So I'm obviously someone who has been very interested in what's going on there, and I have found it hard to follow along, keep up, find reliable places to contribute. I think that it will get better, and they're doing a lot of work to try to document things, but yeah, especially with like even just thinking about a form element that is rendered in React, there's definitely a lot of things that people have to learn, a lot of patterns that are being established by Experience Builder. So yeah, that is a valid concern. I also know that that's something that they're aware of and are trying to find ways to improve. But yeah, cool. Anything else? All right, thanks.